everyone attended the annual Pentecost celebration and fair. Bishop Gervais even exchanged pleasant greetings with the Dean, the Chapter, and Master Guillaume. It was just like old times.
The Gothic cathedral was a kind of miracle, the tangible result of 2 centuries of economic growth and prosperity, especially in the cities. By the 13th century, the cities became magnets for farmers bringing their new surpluses, for traders eager to buy and sell, and for a new international merchant class who worked from warehouses and docks along the waterways like this one here at Amiens. The medieval city provided excitement, opportunity, and freedom. As the cities grew, they competed with each other for trade and business, just as cities do today. International traders, cloth merchants, and grain dealers mingled with the faithful outside the house of God. One of the things that attracted people and encouraged them to come from far away, bringing their money with them, was the relics. In most cases, the greater the cathedral, the greater and more powerful the relics it contained. This is said to be the head of St. John the Baptist, kept among the treasures at Amiens. It was brought back to France by the Crusaders, who scoured the Holy Land for relics such as this. The relics and the miracles they could produce were considered so important in the Middle Ages that King Louis IX paid a fortune for what he believed to be Christ's authentic crown of thorns. There is more than a little dispute about whether it actually was. There were several crowns of thorns making their way through Europe at that time, all equally well authenticated. So there was a strong connection between a cathedral's drawing power and its town's wealth. A definite link between business and religion. For example, the town docks at Amiens were jointly owned by the merchants and the cathedral chapter. The inscription outside this chapel reads, "The good people from the towns about Amiens who sell woad built this chapel with their offerings." Woad is a plant that provided the basic blue dye of the Middle Ages. It still grows around here. It once was a flourishing industry. It helped build this cathedral, the city's pride. The proudest of the townspeople were the churchmen themselves, the priests and the bishop. Like Bishop Évrard de Fouillois, whose impressive tomb we see here. The bishop was not only the spiritual leader of his diocese, he was also among the most powerful political figures. They could be kindly, pious men like David's Bishop Philippe, or greedy, mean-spirited ones like Gervais. But one of the reasons the cathedral of this period are so large and spectacular is that the church leaders had both the power and the resources to build them that way. A town's relation to its bishop could often be strained. In 1112, the citizens here in Laon were so unhappy with their cruel and cynical Bishop Gaudry that they bought a communal charter from the king to separate themselves from him. When Gaudry got back to town, he paid the king even more to annul the charter, leading to considerable unrest. Gaudry's soldiers murdered the leader of the townsmen in cold blood. So the outraged citizens marched right into this palace, dragged the bishop out, cut his head off, and set fire to the cathedral and to the palace. The new bishop had to send the local relics on tour twice, just to pay for repairs. Financing a cathedral was hardly ever an easy task, even in the pious Middle Ages. 100 years after Laon, the people of Reims rose in bloody revolt against heavy taxation and halted construction for years. In fact, peasants all over France who could least afford it were often made to bear the heaviest financial burden. Construction taxes forced many peasants to borrow from city merchants and moneylenders, who themselves would profit handsomely again once the cathedral was completed. Ironically, the local parish churches sometimes suffered most of all, as they had to stop their own building projects and repairs and pledge large sums of money to the cathedral fund. Each cathedral had its own story, and there was a darker side to many of them, including, as we'll see, Beaulieu.
We live in an age of wonders. Every day I thank God that in our time he has revealed his science to us so we could glorify him with our cathedral. Master Guillaume himself is a wonder. Though the years hang heavy on his shoulders, his zeal is that of a child. Yesterday he explained the roofing process to a new group of apprentices, as if for the first time.
The roof will be a series of triangular trusses which the carpenters will first assemble on the ground. After this test, they will dismantle and hoist each one to the top of the walls, where they will be reassembled. The trusses and the beams connecting them are secured with strong oak pegs.
This is not work for the timid.
Once the beams are in place, we can erect a windlass to hoist the rest of the timber and help in setting up the trusses. In the meantime, the roofers will be casting lead sheets to cover the wooden frame. They will also cast the drain pipes and gutters. Water will be directed through the lead pipes and channels down and away from the roof and out of the mouths of the gargoyles.
That should prove a chastening sight for the wicked, showing the spirits of hell awaiting the unrepentant.
With the roof and gutters in place, we will have the protection we need to begin the vaulting. The stone, mortar and heavy materials will be raised by means of the great wheel. First, temporary wooden centerings will be mounted on the scaffolding. Then, the cut stones of the ribs, the voussoirs, will be hoisted onto the centering and mortared by the masons. Then, they can insert the keystone and lock the ribs together at the crown. These ribs become a frame for the construction of the vault itself. The vaulting is made up of webbing, layers of lightweight stone mortared together. Initially, it will be held in place by wood lagging underneath. Once the mortar has set, a 4-inch layer of concrete will be poured over the entire vault to help stabilize it. Only when it is set can the lagging and centering be removed. And we proceed to the next bay.
Too advanced in age to climb to the roof any longer, Master Guillaume supervised the operation from the ground. His assistant, Robert de Cormont, urged him to rest, but Guillaume would have none of it.
Robert! You do not go to bed when you are halfway up the mountain.
That moment will be forever engraved in my memory.
Quick! Over there! Master Guillaume!
He's dead. Lord have mercy.
All work ceased after the wall collapse, and the following day, Master Guillaume de Senlis was laid to rest in the transept. As he did for Bishop Philippe, His Grace spoke glowing words for Master Guillaume.
Would that he had been half so kind to Master Guillaume while he was yet alive.
Immediately after the service, Robert began a meticulous investigation into the cause of the collapse. He delivered his report 5 weeks later to the assembled chapter.
The stone was weak and ill-suited to the purpose, just as Master Guillaume predicted. The stone from the quarry of the bishop.
And I now have proof that Bishop Gervais has been diverting funds pledged to the cathedral building to his own personal use.
Something must be done.
There was no turning back. I was charged to write a letter to King Louis himself. Within a month, the king arrived in Beaulieu with the announced intention of touring the cathedral. But that evening, he met in private with the chapter and the dean. And I would be telling an untruth if I denied that there was much relief in the chapter and town when word came that His Majesty summoned His Grace to fulfill a vow he had taken many years before to go on a crusade. He was buried in North Africa. God rest his soul. Upon the departure of the bishop, an accounting was conducted of his holdings.
There is no money left. Construction cannot resume.
These are dark days for us. The cathedral stands uncompleted. The sheds of the masons and carpenters are empty. Neighboring towns prosper at our expense. Only a miracle can help us now. And I fear I may not see it.
This is the tombstone of Ulysses Berger, the architect and master builder of Saint-Nicaise, here in Reims. He's holding a model of the church, and around him are the implements he used in overseeing its construction: a measuring stick, a pair of calipers, and a square. These were just about the only tools a medieval builder like our Guillaume de Senlis would have had to supervise the building of a structure like this. What he lacked in technology, the medieval builder had to make up in ingenuity and personal skill. Not only did he have to be able to read and write, but he also needed a keen understanding of applied geometry, substantial knowledge of the existing buildings of his time, and as if this weren't enough, he also had to be able to manage the multitude of workers required for such an undertaking. There were as many as 50 individual sculptors working at Amiens, and considerably more than that here at Reims. The organization and planning must have been nothing less than incredible. The most important craftsmen were the stonemasons. They were divided into the rough masons who cut, mortared, and laid the heavy stone, and the freemasons who carved and laid the more intricate stonework, such as the ribbing, the tracery, and all the ornamentation. All the masons served a long and rigorous apprenticeship. They were highly organized and mobile, traveling from town to town wherever there was work. Now under the masons served the quarrymen, the mortar mixers, and the carriers, which often included oxen. Those animals were considered so important here at Laon, by the way, that they were immortalized in stone in the towers. None of the menial laborers were treated as well as the masons, and none were paid much for their work, particularly the oxen. At one cathedral whose records still survive, workers began in the summer before 5 a.m. and continued on until 7 or 8 in the evening, a 14 or 15-hour day, with a half hour for breakfast, 1.5 hours for lunch and a short nap, they must have needed it by then, and a half hour for a late afternoon snack. In the winter, the people who managed not to be laid off only worked a 9-hour day. Around every cathedral, virtually all labor was skilled, to some degree, as well as professional and organized. There's the story of the cult of the carts from Chartres, where noble citizens were supposed to have hitched themselves to wagons to help transport building materials. It's very romantic and very moving, but very doubtful. Many other tales have come down to us about amateurs so inspired by the undertaking that they were willing to work for free. In fact, there's an epic song of the period about a pious local man who worked entirely for love, wouldn't accept any money for his labors. The other workers killed him. And there's plenty of opportunity for that at a place like this. Money for the construction project was handled by the cathedral's chapter. Here at Amiens, the chapter house actually adjoins the cathedral. The chapter hired the master builder, dispensed the payroll, kept the records, and bought materials. They appointed one of their own to be custos fabricae, or keeper of the fabric, to personally administer all these tasks and to keep the tons of supplies and materials flowing to the builders. Clearly, the most important material was stone, and chapters generally bought or started their own quarries. It was extremely difficult and expensive carting stone, so quarries were located as close to the worksite as was possible. Another crucial and expensive item was timber, especially the long, heavy beams required for the roof. But by the end of the 13th century, there weren't many trees left in northern France that could meet these requirements, so most of the wood had to be shipped in from other countries. Many of the building trades are proudly displayed in the stained glass and carvings. All in all, building a cathedral was a tremendously expensive, time-consuming, and intricate process. In fact, it still is. Three individual trades are represented in the stained glass at Chartres, showing not only the integration of secular and religious life in the Middle Ages, but the tremendous pride in craftsmanship that had its prime showcase in the cathedral.
The election of Friar Roland as the new bishop is most welcome. No one has forgotten his service to the poor and the lepers. But what his grace faces is formidable. And who could be surprised after what happened under Bishop Gervais? For many months, each meeting at the chapter was an exercise in frustration. Until one day...
My Lord Canons, I have the most wondrous news to relate.
Merchant Thibault, this is highly irregular.
I beg your forgiveness, but I must tell you, while it is still fresh in my mind... Just this morning, Bishop Roland told me of St. Francis of Assisi and his miraculous way with animals. Later, as I was walking through the woods north of the town, all at once, I was blinded by a great light. When I recovered my senses, I could not believe it, but there could be no doubt. My eyes beheld a vision of the Blessed Virgin, clothed in the sacred veil of Beaulieu. Upon her finger rested a small bird, which she bade fly to me. The bird lit upon my finger and spoke to me, just as to St. Francis. It told me that my great prosperity in business has conformed to a heavenly plan. My Lord Canons, I am instructed by the Blessed Virgin herself to give my fortune over to the cathedral.
Saints be praised.
Word of the miracle spread quickly, and so did its results. And Merchant Thibault retired to the service of the Franciscan hostel as a lay brother. But through his gift, the faith of the people was restored. Pledges began anew. Soon, Master Robert was overseeing a new army of workers. The damaged walls were shored up with better stone, and the debris from the fallen bays was cleared away. The nave was completed, and the splendid towers begun. Robert is most confident now, and has even begun the casting of 4 bronze bells at the Beaulieu foundry.
It is a delicate process, Your Grace. The craftsman first must make a clay and plaster model, which is then covered with a layer of wax, the desired thickness of the finished bell. The mold is covered with additional clay and plaster and heated over a fire. The melted wax runs out and leaves a cavity into which the molten bronze is poured. When the metal cools, the mold is destroyed and the bell is smoothed and tuned.
I cannot wait to hear it. Day by day, the towers rise before our eyes. Town is prospering. We are blessed with a fine bishop. We have much to be thankful for.
It is with deepest respect that I, Ansel, take quill in hand to assume the task of our brother Pierre, who departed this earth on the 4th day of September in the year of our Lord, 1267. He dedicated himself to this chronicle for more than 50 years. I hope I can prove a worthy successor. Progress has been inspiring these past years. It is thrilling to know I will see the completion of this great church, just as it must have been to see its beginning. I most enjoyed watching the carpenters finish building the great spire. It is a frame of wood covered tightly with sheets of lead, then splendidly decorated. The wind is terrifying and the height dizzying, but the view is well worth the fright. I confess to lingering more than once to gaze at the heavenly sunsets. Inside the cathedral, stonecutters and sculptors completed mouldings and capitals, while skilled masons created a maze on the floor of the nave. Finding one's way to the centre is certainly worthy of God's blessing, signifying as it does the pilgrimage journey of the pious. They came from far and wide for the dedication. My heart sang out, for I knew that the great cathedral of Beaulieu, a beacon for all the children of God, was now, at long last, complete.
If you think about it, the Gothic cathedral, or any church for that matter, was essentially built as a stage for the Mass, the greatest drama in Christian faith, the mystical play in which worshippers reenact the key event of the Last Supper and seek their own salvation through the sacrifice of Jesus. The scale of that stage may be the single thing that sets the cathedral apart. As physical setting for the Mass, the Gothic cathedral is truly awesome.
Your eyes immediately travel heavenward, and you're instantly surrounded by the mystique and the promise of supernatural power. But even aside from that, you feel the presence as soon as you enter this building. There is, first of all, the light of divine illumination. The images seem to float above us in the air. That isn't just glass. That's drama. It's also an important teaching device. Keep in mind that in the Middle Ages, outside the clergy, not many people could read or write. So the cathedrals were planned to help ordinary men and women understand and appreciate their faith. Outside in stone, inside in stone and wood and glass, the cathedral is a three-dimensional picture book of religious instruction and a guide along the pathway to salvation.
The cathedral reaffirmed for every pilgrim that his faith was real. It placed Christian belief safely out of the reach of uncertainty, making that belief as substantial and soaring as the cathedral itself.
Cathedral art also strove to constantly link religious and secular life, to glorify kings and princes along with apostles and saints. The saints, apostles, heroes and martyrs are portrayed as human, sensitive and loving, and none more so than Mary herself. Most of the prominent cathedrals of this period are dedicated to Notre Dame, Our Lady. In an age of chivalry and exalted womanhood, it is as if an entire society had fallen in love. Mary is perceived as the Mother of God and as the human vessel through which God became flesh. She's therefore both of heaven and of earth, just like the cathedrals that bear her name.
So for all its structural brilliance and artistic splendor, the story of the building of a Gothic cathedral, like Chartres, where we began, is primarily one of faith. Faith in man's willingness to struggle and his ability to triumph, as well as faith in God to provide. In a world of temptation and uncertainty, the cathedral was an inspirational and permanent reminder of all that medieval man valued most. Its size and splendor assured and reassured the promise of eternal life in God's heavenly kingdom when the trials of life on earth came to an end.